chapter 4, verse 11. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tams tathaiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanuvartante manushya partha sarvashah. Howsoever men approach me, even so do I satisfy them. Men tread my path in all ways, O Partha. Partha, another name for Arjuna. Now, the verses 11 to 18 forms the second topic, which says how the self or God, how does it relate to action? So what's the relationship between the Atman and the self? Verses 11 to 18. Now, the verse clarifies a very interesting point, perhaps a general misconception. What he says here is, howsoever men approach me, even so do I satisfy them. Now, when they say the word I or me, it means the self, or in another sense, you must understand it to be as God. What he's saying is, howsoever men approach me, means you have a choice of action. You could perform noble actions, you could perform ignoble actions, or you could be indifferent to an action, means you can perform good, bad, or indifferent. Whatever be the nature of your action, he says, the self, I shall satisfy them, means I enlive in them. Now, what is the common misconception? The common belief is that God would favor anything that is good, and God has nothing to do anything that is bad. All the atrocious actions, all the unrighteous actions, God has nothing to do. God only has got an interest, or he only supports actions with a positive intent. That which has a malicious or negative intent, God has got nothing to do with it. This is the general belief. But here he says, howsoever men approach me, so do I satisfy them. Men tread my path in all ways. When he says my path, is because all are because of him. In fact, God is the enlivening principle. God is responsible for everything to happen. Without God, nothing can happen. Without God, I can't be speaking on the Gita to you right now. Without that God enlivening, you will not be in a position to listen to me. But God has no interest in either allowing me to speak, nor has God any interest in allowing you to listen or understand. God has got nothing to do with the action. God is a neutral witness. We all got to understand that God is a sakshi, a very beautiful Sanskrit term, which means it's a neutral witness. So God enlivens every action, whether be it bad, good, or indifferent, or a neutral action. It enlivens it, but it is not accountable for the actions you perform. Like good actions accrue merit, bad actions accrue demerit. You can't thank God all for the good actions, and you can't blame God for the bad actions. God has got nothing to do with the good or the bad. You got to take the responsibility for the nature of actions you perform. As we just learned a little earlier, in the couple of verses earlier, whether you choose to perform evolutionary actions or devolutionary actions, the choice is with you. God will do his part of enlivening you. So the same God would enliven a great saint to do a noble act. The same God will enliven a terrorist to do an atrocious act of killing innocent people. God has got nothing to do with the act. God is a neutral entity. It just enlivens all actions. And a best example we have been given is just like petrol in a car. Petrol enlivens the car. It is responsible for a car to be driven safely. It is also responsible for the car to have an accident. If the car actually was short, it ran out of petrol perhaps a few meters ahead of that accident, there wouldn't have been that accident. At the same time, you cannot say, I had an accident because of the petrol, nor can you say that I have reached home because of the petrol. And yet, you wouldn't have reached home if you didn't have petrol, nor would you have had an accident if you had petrol, or if you didn't have petrol. So you can't blame petrol for safe or accident. Similarly, you can't thank God or blame God, but God is responsible for everything. So he clarifies that general misconception. So he says, I satisfy them, men tread my path in all ways. Now what you got to understand is, there's no use praising the Lord or blaming the God, because God is neutral. But that doesn't mean you should never ever undermine the role of God. You always should be thankful for that Almighty, for the providence, for that role the God plays. You should never take that egoism or have that egoistic notion that I am responsible for everything. Nothing moves without the self. I can't move my finger. I can't move my fingers without the self enlivening it. So I do nothing. It's all the self does. But I am responsible for the nature of actions I perform. So what you got to understand is, God plus a motive or a desire creates an action. So the onus is on me to nurture my thoughts, to change the character of my thoughts and desires, as a result of which the actions are better and I'm a better person. I'm a transformed individual. So the message here is, God is a neutral, but it is a witness. It is not accountable for everything. It is responsible for everything. It's a beautiful message.